Hi there, and welcome to Outdoors and Country Living. My name is Leanne. My husband Tom and I grow and raise about 80% or more of our own food needs. We live in the country on about 10 acres of land, and we grow all of our food naturally without any sprays or chemicals. You can see here where some cabbage larvae have eaten these plants. But despite that, without any sprays or chemicals, we have been able to produce these beautiful heads of cabbage. You can see in this clip here, we have some garden netting over the raised beds that the cabbage were in, and that just helps reduce the amount of larvae that the cabbage moths will lay on the plants. But look at that beautiful head of cabbage. All natural. No harmful chemicals or pesticides on anything that we grow here. So today in this video, we're going to be showing you how we make fermented sauerkraut from our fresh cabbage. So we hope you stick around. This is one of our favorite foods. It is a superfood. It is extremely healthy. It will boost your immune system and make your gut healthy by eating fermented foods. We all need to eat more fermented foods every day. Tom and I have been gardening our entire marriage, which has been 26 years now, and we both grew up in families who did a lot of gardening and food preservation as well. So we have a little bit of experience. But over the years, we have found that just growing our food naturally is best not only for us, health-wise, but we get the best results. We also grow a lot of our own fresh herbs. This is some dill here. Obviously, we're going to be using dill in our sauerkraut. This actually was all voluntary this year. We didn't plant any. It will come back every year if you allow the seeds to fall back into the soil. But fresh dill is one of our favorite things to use in pickles and definitely in our sauerkraut. Now that we're done harvesting, let's head inside and get going on this sauerkraut. So we're going to wash our heads of cabbage. We just removed any additional soil that might have been on them. And before we start, we're going to save some cabbage leaves to go on top of the kraut once we get it in the crock. And we will show you that a little bit later in this video, how we save some leaves. But look at that beautiful cabbage inside. It is flawless. Tom's just quartering the heads of cabbage because they're quite large, and we find that quartering them makes them easier to work with. Just cut it right down the middle of the core. Now we eat the core in our cabbages. We always have. And Tom will show you how he just slices it. You don't have to remove it. It will not make anything bitter or bad tasting. Just thinly slice the cabbage, about 1/4 inch thick. It doesn't have to be precisely uniform, just approximate. Here he sliced up the core. Now if you don't want to eat it, that's fine, but it ferments and is wonderful, so why not? You're going to need a large bowl. Since our heads of cabbage are above normal size, we will be using a very large bowl to mix this in. Tom's just showing you here that he's slicing the core. That's actually his favorite part of the sauerkraut, are the thicker pieces that he finds mixed throughout. We're going to be using 2 heads of cabbage per batch of sauerkraut that we're making today. Now that he has both heads of cabbage chopped up in this large bowl, very big bowl, we're going to be sprinkling salt on top. You want to use a non-iodized salt. This is pink Himalayan, just our preference. I'm using 3 tablespoons because these are very large heads of cabbage, but typically 1 tablespoon of salt per head of cabbage is appropriate. You can adjust that if your cabbage heads are large like ours are. Just massage that salt in, toss it around, and you're going to notice the cabbage start to wilt a little bit and draw out the excess water that's in it, and that's what we're looking for. It's shiny here. It's because it's pulling out the water, and in the bottom of the bowl you can see the liquid. That's simply just from salting the cabbage, and it's pulling out the water through osmosis. We're going to be using caraway seed. I add about a tablespoon of caraway seed per head of cabbage that I'm using. So I'm going to be adding 2 tablespoons of caraway seed. These are just the whole caraway seeds. If you don't like caraway seed, you could leave it out, but we really like it. It adds good flavor. Mix that in. And we're going to be adding our fresh dill sprigs. If you don't have fresh dill, you could use dried dill. And this is all just to taste, whatever your preference is. Out of that bundle of fresh dill that we harvested today, I'm using about half. Half in this batch, and then I'll use the other half in our second batch of kraut. Later in this video, you'll see that. But I just pull the dill sprigs off of the main stems because those main stems are hard and you can't really eat them. So you want the smaller pieces. And just, again, do it to your preference. We like a lot of dill here, so. If you've never had fermented sauerkraut, it is the most crispy and crunchy sauerkraut ever. It tastes like a giant crock of pickles. We're going to be using our fermenting crocks today. So these are our fermenting crocks. We have 2 of them. They have a water seal chamber, or kind of like a moat around the top there. And then these are ceramic weights that come with the crock, because it's very important when you're fermenting that you hold the food down underneath your brine. So we're simply going to start putting in the cabbage mixture into the crock. Fermented sauerkraut, we typically like about a 3-week fermentation period. You could do it to your preference. It could be less time or it could be more time. It all depends on how sour you want the sauerkraut. So we're just going to keep filling this crock until we get this whole bowl in there. And Tom's just stomping it down with his fist. You want to press it in there pretty firmly, just because you want to make sure it all stays underneath your brine. But we also use the cabbage leaves on top, underneath the weights, to hold everything down underneath the brine. You're going to see that as well. That excess salt and water that was pulled out, we're actually going to dump it in the crock. We want to use that. A lot of people might say, oh my goodness, this is a lot of salt. Well, with fermentation, if you don't have enough salt, then your food will go bad. This is a very old food preservation method, and salt is the ticket. One last stomping with your fist. Our fists work great. We made a little stomper, but we find just using our hand is easiest. So he's just firmly packed that in there. Next, we're going to make the brine that goes on top. So for every 4 cups of brine with water, you want 2 tablespoons of salt. So I'm making 8 cups of brine, so I'm using 4 tablespoons of salt. 8 cups of brine typically covers cabbage in our fermentation crocks here. But again, 4 cups of water, 2 tablespoons salt. But I've doubled that. Stir to dissolve your salt. I just use tap water. You don't have to heat it up or anything. Cabbage leaves are going in. This is to help hold all of that sauerkraut down. And then I will be putting the weights on top of the cabbage leaves. Those will be discarded and not eaten in the end. Now that the cabbage leaves are all seated in there, I'm going to put the weights on. So we get all of this in there, and then we're going to pour the brine on top of all of this. Just like to press it down a little bit more. Add your brine, and that brine is going to come up over these weights. I can't stress to you enough the importance of having all of your contents submerged underneath the brine. There, you can tell everything is underneath that level of brine. Now we're simply going to add our lid. And I said earlier, this is a water lock. I'm going to add water to the point where it's above that little notch there in the lid, which I'll show you in just a second. That little notch, you always want to keep water above that. That's what locks in your contents so it doesn't get oxygen and spoil and ruin your ferment. As promised, I told you Tom was going to show you how we save the leaves to put on top. He just slices the bottom there and pops them off. They don't all come off just perfect, but this one did. So 2 leaves or 3. We'll just be using 2 for this one. So you can use purple cabbage to make sauerkraut, and we're doing it here. It doesn't matter the color of your cabbage. We like a mixture. It's a beautiful sauerkraut when it's all said and done, because purple cabbage is just amazingly pretty. Slice it the exact same way. Isn't cabbage pretty inside? It's pretty cool how it grows, really, from the inside out. So this second batch is also going to have 2 heads of cabbage. We will be salting. Typically, like I said, 1 tablespoon of salt per head of cabbage is fine. I'm using 3 just because our heads of cabbage are quite large. Massage it in again, mix it around, and you're going to feel it start to soften pretty quickly. It's pretty neat, the old-fashioned ways of food preservation, how they work. Amazing. So fermented foods will increase your gut health, which if you have a healthy gut, then you have a healthy, strong immune system. And fermented sauerkraut is one of our favorite ways to incorporate fermented foods into our diet. 2 tablespoons of caraway seed again, 1 per head of cabbage that you use. So after the sauerkraut ferments, we like about a 3.5 week fermentation period. We will pull it out of the crocks and store it in containers in the refrigerator, whether that's a covered bowl or whether it's a half-gallon mason jar. Whatever you have will work. Once you get it to your liking on the sour scale, take it out of your fermentation crock, store it in the refrigerator. The refrigeration slows down the fermentation, and then it will keep in your refrigerator for many months until you eat it all. Just stomping it down again, firmly pack it in there. If you don't have a fermentation crock like this, you could use any kind of crock. You could cover it with a towel, a plate, just allow something that's breathable, because as it produces its gases, it needs to release those. And through a towel or a plate will allow that. You could even ferment in mason jars. Again, just press everything down. You want your brine covering. So we ferment about 3 weeks. I usually put a date on the top of our crocks, as you see here, and we wait. Take it out from the crock and store it in the refrigerator. Thanks for watching how we make fermented sauerkraut. If you have questions, leave us a comment below. You guys take care. We'll see you later.